Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Judd Hendricks and I want to welcome you to Interfaith Paths to Peace. This is one of our panel conversations with religious clergy, and I want to welcome all of these amazing voices and wisdom that we have on the conversation today. The specific conversation that we're having is entitled Vishnu, Values and Vaccinations. Religious leaders reflect on how faith informs vaccination choices and the emergence of a post-pandemic world. It's fun to say post-pandemic, right? I love saying post-pandemic, whether it's true or not, or how it's true. I just love saying it. So a deep bow to all of these religious leaders. The folks that have agreed to be on the call are really a deep bow to each of you for the wisdom that you hold. And we're here today to really kind of explore our different religious traditions and how they reflect and think about vaccinations specifically, but also to hear how these religious communities are emerging from the pandemic. And if you have questions, you're welcome to put those in the comment box on Facebook, and we'll bring those in later on in our conversation. So what we're going to do, we'll just jump right in, and I'm going to start with Dr. Babar, and if you all could introduce yourself, and I've asked them to reflect specifically on a couple of questions. What are the theological moral resources from your tradition that encourage or discourage getting a vaccination? And then what are the barriers that maybe some of your members of your congregation may be facing in getting vaccinations? And then specifically, how is your community coming out and emerging from being an online world back to face-to-face meetings? Dr. Babar, thank you so much for being on, not only sharing the wisdom of the Muslim community, but also for your work as a physician. You've been at the front line of encouraging vaccinations and caring for those who may have had COVID. So thanks for your presence in our community, and we'd love to hear some of your reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Judd. Thanks to IPP for highlighting such an important matter for not only our local community, but for our global community, because we are at crossroads at this point, and it's kind of our fight against time. The sooner we all can get vaccinated, the less time this monstrous disease will have to prey on our fellow citizens. I am Dr. Muhammad Babar. I'm internal medicine and geriatric medicine physician and president of Muslim Americans for Compassion. Like every faith tradition, the sanctity of human life is paramount, and in my faith tradition, Holy Quran says that saving one life is like saving the whole humanity. Within Islamic traditions, if we go back in history, we see examples that when these global pandemics happened in those ancient times, that the quarantine and hand washing and other techniques were observed and were also recommended to the community. There is a saying of Prophet Muhammad in the 6th century that which says that there was a pandemic, and he recommended people to wash hands and do not leave the cities where the disease was prevalent, and do not go to those places. So it was basically the modern day lockdown, which many of our countries have recommended and have followed. We human beings are interconnected with one another. And especially when there is a contagious disease, then it becomes more important for us to not only look after our own welfare and of those who are our close loved ones, but we need to make sure that the people we come across, our neighbors, our colleagues, our fellow citizens, that we do not transmit the disease to them, and we make sure that their well-being is taken care of. So on that token, as a practicing Muslim and as a practicing physician, I received my vaccine on the very second day. And then my 14-year-old boys, they received their vaccine on the very first day when it became available to 12 to 16-year-old. There are, as we know, that modern vaccination started in 18th century with smallpox, and that was the time and peak of colonization in our world. So if many of the parts of our world that somehow in their minds, even this day, they connect vaccination with colonization. Similarly, we also see that we had some wrongs were done. In our own country, for example, in syphilis, we need to know the Tuskegee the trials. So these are the things that which really put fear in the minds of especially in minorities. And similarly with this vaccine, because this was kind of, it's a scientific marvel that in such a short time we were able to produce this vaccine. So there are some people that who have concern that because it was approved in such a rapid pace that there may be some side effects which are unknown. But so far, millions and millions of people are vaccinated, and we have not seen any major issue with it. Within COVID-19 pandemic has affected our communities, irrespective of our faith traditions. For us Muslims, last year was our holy pilgrimage, which obligatory on every Muslim who can afford it once in lifetime. Last year, there were only a handful of people who attended that for symbolic purposes. There was no large gathering. The last year's Ramadan and this year's Ramadan was the first time that our gatherings in the mosques. Last year, there were no gatherings, and this year there were very limited gatherings. The Islamic centers, like our other places of worships, were closed to public in person for most of the time last year. And now they have opened up with due diligence. We are Homo sapiens, we are interconnected, we all bleed red, we share the same genome. This pandemic shows us that how fragile we are, that one virus initiates and triggers this illness in one part of the world and the whole world is in lockdown. This is a reminder to us that we share common values and humanity, and we are each other's brothers and sisters. It also tells us that if we human beings put our mind to something, we can tackle those issues, we can move mountains. In the vaccinations which are available out there, that this is the human victory, and this is the utility of this God-given mind and use of science that we were able to achieve it in such a short time. It reminds us that there are other disease processes, there are other illnesses, there are social injustices out there, there are many other things which are threatening our public health. There are weapons of mass destruction, there are guns. So there is nothing in our world that if we all put our collective mind and our collective will together, we can solve those problems. And in the end, I will put my physician hat and will request all of our friends who are listening via Facebook Live, or if they will listen, their recording version of our talk, and my fellow faith leaders, they will also be sharing and pondering on the same message that please go out and get this message, get the vaccine. This vaccine is safe. Trust the science. We trusted the science. We got control of past epidemics, the diseases which had killed millions and millions of people, like smallpox, polio. We were able to control those diseases through vaccination. So similarly, COVID-19, we are already seeing in our country that things are opened up and life is getting almost to normal. So if we all get vaccinated, if we get this critical level of vaccination in our communities, then this disease will be no more than those like flu. We may be getting a vaccine every year, but it will be under control. It will not cause the casualties at mass level, which we have seen last year. And once again, I am thankful to IPP for arranging this event. And also I am thankful to all of my panel members for sharing this time, and I have learned during my journey in this city from each and every one of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Babar, and all your work in this space. And I really appreciate in the Islamic tradition, historically, there's been a deep appreciation and even a source of scientific wisdom out of those communities that Islam has been a leading religion in several scientific movements, and especially in the health movement. So thank you for embodying that so well in our community, Dr. Babar. Mary Alice, welcome. We also want to welcome Mary Alice to Louisville. You've been here about a year. I think you came back when the pandemic started, and Mary Alice is at Highland Baptist Church. And thanks for being on today, Mary Alice.
Thanks for the invitation. It has been such a unique way to begin my time in Louisville and my time at Highland, all during the pandemic. I remember visiting with the staff here at Highland right as the world was getting ready to shut down, and we did my call weekend to the church completely virtually, and I started in August of last year. So COVID has definitely defined so much of my time in Louisville. So the idea of saying a post-pandemic world is definitely exciting to me too, Judd. I think the first thing I might offer to the conversation is just a bit of reflection on my own experience of getting a vaccine. And I am curious whether others would resonate with this, but it was a sacred experience. And so to be able to reflect on that in an interfaith space, I thought would be pretty unique. I mean, I loved, you're standing in line with this diverse group of people all waiting to receive this life-giving thing that is going to hopefully turn our world around. And I will never forget that moment. And it actually came to mind Sunday at Highland. We met in person for the very first time since COVID started. And people stood in line to receive communion and to come forward to receive the bread and the cup. And I just thought of the similarities between those two moments. And I don't know about you all, but I will just never forget that and the sacredness of that experience and all that went into it. And, I feel like as my faith informs this decision for me and for others, it's Jesus is calling us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And what greater love could there be than to receive this vaccine that hopefully keeps those around us, whether they be family, friends, coworkers, someone in line with you at the grocery store, anyone with whom you come in contact, safe from this vaccine. As I think about the theological implications, it's with loving your neighbor and how we can all partner together to do that. As I mentioned, Highland just started meeting in person this weekend. It was a significant moment for us. It was significant for me because this was my first time to worship with my community face to face. And after being here for, 10 months now and doing Zoom and Facebook Live and learning to speak to the dot on my camera like I'm doing right now, gosh, that was such a breath of fresh air, and it reminded me why I love to do what I do, and to be in worship with a body of people face to face. That was a sacred moment for sure. So we are slowly emerging into life back together, starting with 2 worship services, then bringing back our Bible study times, and then bringing back other parts of life together. We have done an anonymous survey of our congregation, wanting to know what percentage of people are vaccinated, wanting to respect people's privacy, not wanting to publicize anybody's personal records, but at the same time wanting to be able to communicate to the church some kind of percentage that might make folks feel more comfortable coming back into the building and back into our shared space. And so I'm grateful that we have a very high percentage of folks who are vaccinated. And we've had folks who have helped a lot of our senior adult community be able to sign up for appointments and navigate the ins and outs of those kinds of things. As far as what we've learned during the pandemic, gosh, I think one of the biggest things is how much we need each other. I was reminded of that in worship this weekend, just with people of all ages and stages of life who have not been together for over a year. And that while I'm grateful for this technology that has tied us together over this year, that nothing can replace this face-to-face, day in and day out shared life together that we experience, and that is so sacred to our church. One of the things we did during the pandemic that I thought was pretty innovative and meaningful, we divided the church into neighbor groups. And so we realized we have church members all across Louisville and even, south of Louisville, Indiana. And we thought, how do we stay connected at this time when we can't be together face to face? And so we assigned each deacon or leader within our congregation 8 to 10 people who were hopefully somewhat within their neighborhood. We charted out this huge map of Kentucky, Indiana, plotted everyone out. We would do deliveries from time to time, front porch visits, just to try to stay connected and to have a friendly face showing up at your front door to say, hey, I'm from Highland. We love and care about you. We want you to know that we still see you. We are here for you. How can we help? And that was really well received. It was a beautiful way for us to stay connected. And I think it connected people who might not otherwise have even known each other. I had someone say, I had no clue I had so many folks from Highland who lived on my street and I could walk to their house. And so I'm excited to see what might emerge from that and what relationships might continue. In worship on Sunday, we shared a covenant with one another, and we said that we pledge ourselves to be the family of God for one another in this place. And I think after having been apart for 15 months, we needed to hear those words, and I think we will continue to need to hear them. I had someone email me and he said, I didn't come down to make any sort of faith decision on Sunday morning, but if I had, I would have come and said to the congregation, I choose you again. I choose to be again part of this community of faith. So yeah, like Judd, I'm grateful to be slowly finding our way in this post-pandemic life. I know it brings up all sorts of new questions of how do we reopen? Sometimes our staff have said that reopening actually feels more complicated and more challenging than closing because of all the different dynamics and the emotion of it all and what folks are comfortable with and masks or no masks and how do we navigate this? So grateful to be part of this space where we can ask those questions and learn from each other in this as well.
Thanks, Mary Alice. I so appreciated that beautiful image you gave of almost vaccination as sacrament. Like, I don't want to go too far there, but that you're connecting these moments of sacramental meaning or ritual meaning in the actual act of getting a vaccination, being connected to that. That's a beautiful, powerful image. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
And one of the ways in which we historically look at religious rituals and practices is some of those were deeply grounded in the needs of the community, like washing hands. Dr. Babar, you mentioned the washing and cleansing. Those were actual cleansing in the sense of physicalness when we were going to be together. So these rituals that now we kind of take for granted really in many ways had to do with physical health. Cantor, Hordes, I know that a lot of the kosher elements have background in health and actually physical health. And so from the Jewish tradition, thank you for being with us. And would you mind jumping in and sharing some of the resources from your tradition?
You're there. I hear that a lot from other Jewish people, but just like you have like We have a saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There's some people who say, no, it has nothing to do with health. It is listening to God and having faith in God, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, but this is what we have to do. So, but a lot of contemporary Jews especially believe that there are scientific roots to the reasons why we are not supposed to eat shellfish or pork, that they at that time were carriers of disease and caused food poisoning and other kinds of health issues. So it's still open for debate. Would you like me to continue, or was that just a question? Okay.
Yes, please. I'm sorry. I couldn't get off mute there. Yeah, please continue reflecting from your tradition.
Sure. I love being on these panels because so much of what I hear from the other people in the panel really resonates with me and speaks to my tradition as well, especially the Abrahamic faiths. We have the same concept that Babar mentioned, that to save a life is to save an entire universe. It's stated in our Talmud, which is like a post-biblical explanation or fleshing out of the 5 books of Moses and the rest of the Torah. And also this idea that even the most observant, ultra-Orthodox Jews believe that you can break one of the commandments. And when I say commandments, we have 613 commandments, which include the 10 commandments that are also observed in the other faiths, for the sake of saving a life. It's called pikuach nefesh, and you can, whatever, if it's to save a life, you drop whatever you're doing in order to save a life, because as Babar mentioned, and our religions share this concept, and probably other religions too, to save a life is to save an entire universe. Every life is sacred, every life is special. And I've even learned in doing a little bit of research that that we are encouraged to get the vaccine, even if there's an ingredient in the vaccine that is not considered kosher. For instance, if a vaccine contains gelatin that's made from an ingredient from a pig, which normally is absolutely forbidden to eat, if it is to save your life and to save the lives of others, you are commanded to take this vaccine. And connecting to the idea of taking the vaccine in order to save other people's lives, as Mary Alse mentioned, it is the ultimate act of loving your neighbor as yourself, which is repeated again and again in various ways throughout the canon, that we are doing this not just for our own lives, but for other people. And in this way, this experience that we've had for the past, year and a half has really brought those values to the forefront for me. And we've all, used them as a teaching moment for our congregation. There are issues. I won't sugarcoat anything among the very ultra-Orthodox, and some of you may have even heard in some communities in New York, communities in Israel. And that is not a theological objection to the vaccines. Rather, it speaks more to the insular nature of these communities. Their sole source of authority on any major decision is their Rebbe, which is how they address their rabbi. And if their Rebbe is not on board with vaccines because they don't have a very broad understanding of science, or they're very afraid of messages that come from the outside world, they will choose not to. But I will say that over time, most Orthodox rabbis are endorsing vaccines. They make TikTok videos for their community. They put up signs for their community. They give them that information in a variety of different ways, use different media to get that message across. And one of the reasons I think this was such a scary disease for people who've lived their entire lives as ultra-Orthodox observant Jews is that many of the ways that they practice their religion requires them to come into contact with many, many other people. Very often how it plays out is in small rooms. Jews across the board, we have a concept called a minyan, and that is a requirement of 10 Jews to come together in order to say certain prayers. You can pray alone and do the bulk of the liturgy yourself, but there are certain requirements to come together in order to say certain parts of the liturgy, and in order to take the Sifrei Torah, or the scroll which contains the 5 books of Moses, to come out handwritten in Hebrew, identical to every other Torah scroll. We take it out, and in order to take it out and read it, we're supposed to have 10 Jews present. Now, more traditional Orthodox will say 10 men who are Jewish above the age of 13. Or Reform, Conservative, and all of the other liberal streams of Judaism will say 10 Jews. And so it was really frightening for them. It was a disruption in their way that they've only known to celebrate. You need to come together, and as a result, sadly, many of them scoffed at the rules and got together, and it spread, and people died unnecessarily, which might have propelled other Orthodox rabbis who might have not believed at first to see the carnage, see the death, and say, whoa, this is not who we are. And we need to believe in science, which is also a really important principle in Judaism. As far as how this has impacted my community, and another point I wanted to make as well is that throughout the entire history of Judaism, especially through the diaspora, the message is you follow the laws of the land that you are living in, with only, I guess, maybe a few exceptions if it really will cause harm to you or your community. And if the law of the land is that everyone is required to receive a vaccine, that as Jews, we have to accept that as the law of the land, and we need to observe that law. It's very important that we do that. Much of what Mary Alice said really resonated with me, this idea. We went on Zoom very early. We had some doctors and public health professionals in our community who invited us right away, middle of March 2020, and we moved right to Zoom, which really served as a bridge to connect us. I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not getting more people to come back in person. I think some of it is the convenience factor. We have members that live all over the place, and we do have a daily prayer service that lasts about 15, 20 minutes. And to ask people to drive all the way in for this short service is not always very convenient for them. So we're trying to reach people, help them break these habits that have developed over the past year and a half, because it's so important, especially surrounding the laws of mourning after the loss of someone close to you. You are required to sit in your home. It's called the period of Shiva for 7 days, and other people come to you. And sometimes these houses, we call them the Shiva houses, become really crowded, packed bodies wall to wall, which makes me sort of blanch and thinking in terms of COVID. But, of course, we wouldn't get that crowded again. But this idea that you come together and you comfort the mourner is really, really important, and has been shown in light of modern, psychological evidence that it's important for people who are mourning to not be alone. They can turn away from God. They can start to turn against God. And so we're there to help them say this prayer that encourages faith in God at their darkest, lowest moments. So it's a process, and we're trying to slowly move back to being together face to face. We're not eating together because we're requiring masks and proof of vaccination. And eating together is a big part of our tradition, whether it's a ritualized drinking of the wine or grape juice after our services, or sitting down to eat a festive meal. It's something that I personally am really looking forward to, and it's that last stage that will, for me, feel like we're finally back to normal, back together. It's good for psychological purposes too. Many people who come to these feasts or these meals are people who live alone, and that is their social circle, and for them to come and eat again with the rest of us in their community will be very important. And finally, I think what I've learned the most about this pandemic is, before we were not offering anything online for our members, and now we know that, we keep saying the genie's out of the bottle. This is something we'll never go back to not doing. But it's so important for our homebound members, our members who don't drive, members who live in assisted living or nursing homes, have been able to access our services. And especially the older generation, for whom coming to worship service was part of their weekly routine. And it was very, very important to them religiously and socially, and to allow them to have a taste of that is really, really important. And we're definitely happy to continue that, and just also trying to figure out how we're going to do the logistics of how we're going to do that, because Judaism and our brand of Judaism, conservative and Orthodox, we don't use electricity on Shabbat. We don't turn lights on and off. We don't manipulate computers. And for us, it kind of feels like it takes us out of the Sabbath feeling to do that. So we're trying to figure out a way to find the best of both worlds, do maybe a live streaming that's set up before sundown Friday night and turned off sundown Saturday night, allowing that to happen. So it's more trying to figure out to work within the tradition, but to be able to not leave anyone out. So that's just, if anyone has any questions, they can put that in the chat, or I guess ask later on.
Yes. Thank you, Cantor Hordes. Appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that reflection. I also appreciate your ability to speak to, I mean, our traditions, even though you're speaking from the Jewish tradition, those are so diverse, right? We have so many different, these are not monolithic, one-sided, even within our religious traditions. And I appreciate the way you can represent, you know, the different views and perspectives, even within our traditions. Thank you for honoring that and representing that. And again, if you do have questions that have joined us on Zoom, you're welcome to put those into the chat box, and we can continue some conversation on the chat, as well as we'll have some opportunity for open questions in just a moment. If you're joining us on Facebook, you're also welcome to put in questions into the comment section there. I want to invite, you said, Cantor Hordes, you mentioned doing TikTok videos to promote, and that sounds really cool. And so I want to ask Jason Crosby, who's just this cool pastor from Crescent Hill Baptist Church. Jason, I don't know if you've ever done TikTok videos, but if anybody's likely to have done that, you are. So thanks for being with us today, Jason.
Just an introduction, friend. Appreciate that. I have not done a TikTok video. That is something I have not experienced. Although my children are getting old enough now that I could see them roping me into something in the not too distant future. But I have not made it there yet. Judd, thanks for having me today. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and I'm certainly looking forward to an occasion when we'll all be together. That is certainly a day that I am looking forward to. Let me address that first question that you raised, Judd. What are some of the values and principles from my faith tradition, as I understand it, that has informed and shaped my perspective, and I think the perspective of many at Crescent Hill Baptist Church when it comes to the vaccine? And I guess a good way for me to explain it would be to use a sermon illustration. I guess I am a preacher. There was a flood, and there was a man trapped in his house as the floodwaters began to rise. And someone came and knocked on his door and offered him a ride to higher ground. He said, "I'm okay for now. God will save me." The floodwaters continued to rise higher. At this point, a boat came by, knocked on the man's door. Gentleman in the boat said, "Come with me, I'll get you to higher ground." He said, "No thanks, God will save me." Eventually, the floodwaters forced the man to go to the roof. A helicopter came overhead, dropped down a ladder. Another person yelled from the helicopter, get up in the helicopter, I'll get you out of here." And the gentleman once more said, "No thanks. My faith and trust in God will save me." Well, eventually the flood waters overtook the house. The man drowned. He arrives in heaven. When he gets to heaven, the first thing he does when he sees God is the man says, why didn't you save me? I had faith in you." And God said, "Well, I sent you a car, I sent you a boat, and I sent you a helicopter, and you refused to take any of those instruments that I presented for you to save you from this flood." But my point in sharing that is that in my understanding of how God functions and operates in the world, God works through human agents to bring about divine goodness in our lives. That's certainly the case throughout the entire biblical narrative. God worked through individuals from Abraham through the disciples, through Paul. God used incarnational beings that were far from perfect to bring forth goodness in the lives of others. And certainly that's been a lens through which we've viewed our faith tradition as we've been, I think, all trying to figure out what the best course of action would be with vaccines. While the rollout has not been perfect, while there still are some questions about the efficacy or side effects of the vaccine, nonetheless, I think most folks recognize that this is an agent that is a gift from God that has been extended unto us, and by taking it, we can protect the lives of others. Another value, and others have touched upon this, is the value of protecting the common good, particularly the least among us. You know, in Matthew 25, Jesus is asked, when have we, served you the best? And Jesus responds by saying, well, when you have fed the hungry, when you have clothed the naked, when you have visited the sick. Well, in this instance, when you get your COVID shot, by doing so, not only are you protecting yourself, you're protecting others, principally the least among us, because certainly the data has shown that the communities that have been disproportionately impacted, as is often the case, are those who are in poverty and minority groups, and of course the elderly. And so by protecting those who are most vulnerable, we do that when we receive a shot. Judd, I think another lesson that I've learned is that we, in our tradition, we are okay with mystery. One of my favorite lines, I believe it comes from an author named Anne Lamott, is that the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. As people of faith, we recognize that the world is complicated, that our relationship with God at times is shrouded in mystery. We are not called to know with absolute certainty the ways of God or how the world and universe function and operate. We are called to put our faith in the promises that are extended to us by God. And I think that in this year where there's been such transition, where there has been such uncertainty, where it seems like we're heading in this direction one day, and all of a sudden we're jerked in another direction the next day. I think that I have learned that our faith has prepared us to live in the ambiguity and the difficulty that is just not knowing what is going to come next. And so that's been a real valuable resource. I think for me and for others in our community of faith is that our faith is one that is okay with uncertainty and doubt. And there's certainly been a lot of uncertainty and mystery over the course of the past year. One other, I think, lesson learned is that we have all been reminded that while there are certain secular liberties that are offered unto us as citizens in the United States, as people of faith, our individual liberty is always curtailed by our personal love and responsibility to others. Love, if you love other people, by default, in some respects, your individual liberties are constrained. There are no two people on the face of the earth that I love more than my children. But believe me, because I love my children, the liberty that I have to do certain things that I might want to do is greatly curtailed. And I think, and I hope that we've all learned through this process that at times it's very important that we forego certain freedoms in order to care for others, in particular, again, the least among us. We have just begun to gather in person once more. We just had our second Sunday when we have gathered together. Like others, we are gradually reopening. It's amazing how quickly you forget your worship Sunday, Monday, Tuesday church routines. So we're welcoming new groups back week by week at this point. We think that by the end of June, pretty much any group that would wish to resume meeting, we will be prepared to greet them. We are forever changed by the genie that Cantor Sharon mentioned is out of the bottle, which is technology. Our church has a long history. We have many folks that have passed through the doors over the course of the past century plus, and many folks that have connections to the church that are now scattered throughout the country and throughout the world. And so we invested pretty significantly in technology so that our worship services will continue to be live streamed and recorded. But one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now, and I'm sure others are kind of in this space too, is how to do meetings that are both in person, but then also have a virtual option. And so that's the challenge of the moment, right, Mary Alice? And so we're figuring that out because a couple classes that I lead, we regularly will have folks from Arizona or California or New York that are going to want to continue to join us. And so we're still growing and learning when it comes to certain technological fronts. I will say that we are not yet ready to offer those meals, but certainly from the Baptist tradition, the potluck gathering is a valuable component of our tradition. And it's not just to get together to fill up our bellies. It's really a time when people have a chance to commune with one another. And it's very significant, as was mentioned, when it comes to spiritual, emotional, and social enrichment. So we're hoping that we'll be able to resume that this summer at some point. We just haven't made it there yet. So it's been quite a ride. And Judd, when my first TikTok video comes out, I'll send it to you.
I'm waiting. I will definitely share that. I don't even have a TikTok channel. My kids blocked me from even having a TikTok. I don't know if you call it a channel. So I don't even know what I'm talking about. But Jason, thanks so much, and blessings to you and your congregation in returning and answering some really challenging questions. Appreciate your reflection. Let's turn Johnny Alse on. Johnny is with the Hindu Temple of Kentucky and also a professor over at IUS. And Johnny, thanks so much. Let's get away from all the monotheistic traditions, all the Abrahamic traditions, and can you reflect some from Hinduism about the different values and perspectives related to your tradition? Thanks, Johnny, for always representing your community well.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you, IPP, and also Louisville Public Health for putting this forum together. And it is in the public interest and also societal interests and larger global interests that we have this panel discussion from different faith perspective, reinforcing as well as stating the importance of saving lives. Each life saved means multitude of life enriched and protected. And that should be the multiplier effect that Keynes would call and be proud of. Every dollar spent in the economy magnifies itself manyfold in improving the overall performance of the economy, the multiplier effect. And that's exactly what this vaccination is supposed to do, is to prevent the spread of this virus by significant magnitude if people start getting vaccinated. Now, I like the topic. I like the title for a couple of reasons. Number one, it has triple V. V for Vishnu, V for values, and V for vaccination. And I like it because it started with Vishnu, the Hindu god. And more than that, I liked it even better because it's the name of my son. And it is supposed to mean the Lord who sustains. And I always was praying that my son would allow me to sustain my mental capacity. But so far, by grace of divine, it has happened. Now, with this Vishnu, we hope the same mental capacity of the whole world can also be sustained so people get vaccinated, protected, and could aspire for higher purposes of life for which they're born. So from that perspective, in Hinduism, this week culminates in a nice way for me. It starts on a nice note because over the weekend, we had, for the first time ever, what is called as Dhanvantari Homa, or Havan. Havan is a ritual fire worship. And we did 3 of them. Shanti Homa, for peace around the world, those who are suffering, those who are impacted with COVID, and those frontline workers, and everyone who has sacrificed, even politicians who kind of came up with the resources to fight the battle, to accelerate the production of vaccine, the scientists tirelessly working hours and hours, sacrificing everything that their personal life was put in the back burner in order to come up with a cure. And all the pastors, all the individuals, the entire society globally, those who have been working hard, sacrificing, putting their own life at the disposal in order to protect others. It is in their interest and welfare. We kind of did this Havan worship. And it was postponed for a year because of COVID. We wanted to have it right smack in the midst of it, but yet because we wanted participation as well as the collective synergy of multitude of divine souls congregating and thinking for the welfare of everyone at the same time, praying, coming together would be missing. We said, we'll wait. And now that CDC has given guidelines that we can open safely, as long as people are vaccinated and as long as people are wearing masks and as long as people sanitize and socially maintain the distance, we could do it. That's what we did over the weekend. So it was a phenomenal weekend. And we did Sarva Devata Homa, which means all the divine gods and goddesses within our temple. They're blessing the community, they're blessing the welfare and prosperity, happiness, and health of everyone. So of that, the unique one was Dhanvantari Homa. Dhanvantari is Lord of Medicine. It is Lord Vishnu, his avatar, and who wrote this Atharva Veda, in which he captures science of life, Ayurveda. And in that Ayurveda, he is the Lord who provided this, medicinal treatise of how to cure diseases, how to improve wellness, how to enhance the spiritual well-being of individual and allow the mental capacity to detach itself from transient material comforts of life in order to unify and in unison attain the immortality of being one with divine. So that is the Ayurvedic science of life is all about. It is not just preserving body. It is preserving body for higher purpose, a noble goal, a worthy pursuit. So from that perspective, in the traditional Hindu system of medicine, there is absolutely no prohibition against vaccination. In fact, there are references made which predates all the modern vaccines, where step by step they tell you how to cure infectious diseases. And it was quoted in Lancet magazine, medical magazine, verbatim. This is how the modern medicine came about. So therefore, historically, there always have been tension that we even see today between scriptural beliefs and logic and rationality of science. However, it's Albert Einstein who said, science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. So therefore, to coexist religion provides a faith and foundation and a purpose that where science fails, it is beyond science. So, however, it is also the divine who all provides the intellect and kindles the wisdom in people to come up with ways and means and processes and methods by which people can be cured of ailment through rigorous scientific inquiry. So they go together. One doesn't affect the other at all. And from that perspective, all the 4 traditions in Hinduism are not opposed to vaccination. And one of the reasons we were able to open the congregation without checking whether somebody has gotten vaccinated or not is the belief that most of them would have automatically gotten vaccination. Because that's the first thing as a dharmic duty you will do. Not only protect yourself, your family, but also protect the welfare of all those who are intimately connected to you, who are nothing but a divine image of the Lord himself, as he exhibits in you. So therefore, that is the first act of duty people engage in. And therefore, we were able to freely and openly allow everyone to participate. Of course, did everyone come? No. We aren't expecting it at all. Self-selection is a norm. Some people still are afraid. Some people still have some challenges physically. Their immune system might be compromised, or they might have some other ailments, and therefore they don't want to be exposed. And some people naturally, even when they're healthy, they don't visit temple as well. And they will only visit on selective days. So be it. For each one, there's a time and a place and a calling. And let them follow their own inner call. But yet the temple is open to all because we believe that science is also nothing but God's creation. He has created each one of us in the image of himself. And he has also provided the intellect. He has also provided the wisdom. He has provided the tools. He has provided the pathway for learning, improving, coming up with marvels that we saw in in the past year of how quickly they were able to track and come up with a vaccination in such a short time. Now, the question is, from here, where do we go? What are some of the values that are critical for Hindus in taking the vaccination? First and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, there's a greater purpose to life. Yes, everyone has to work, everyone has to worship, and that is what the reasons we are born. One of the things that was missing is people working, and since majority of the people of Hindu faith tradition, they're all in IT industry. For them, work was an easy transition on Zoom. However, there are a substantial number of them engaged in educational sphere, again, Zoom. And there are numerous doctors like Babar who are in the front lines. And they took a greater risk and also greater protection. And hence, one of the things that happened was, rightly so, as a policy, the frontline workers were given the first precedence in getting their vaccine. They were given the first priority. Makes sense. So therefore, most of the doctors of Indian origin, they got their vaccination first because they were directly in contact with or in the space of COVID patients. So they did the duty. They took the shots, they're working. So far to date, as far as we know in our community, we haven't heard a whole number of cases here. However, things are different in India. They started celebrating mission accomplished too soon. Unfortunately, they were not prepared for the second wave and the variant that is now taken over the entire country, devastating the healthcare system and decimating the people. And also it showcased how poor the infrastructure as well as the access to basic medical care is in India. However, what we did last week is also use this opportunity when they opened the temple as a fundraiser for COVID fight in India. So fortunately, the community was generous. We were able to generate close to about $7,000 plus. So that is our effort to showcase, yes, not only it is important to treat here, but prior to this, last year, our entire congregation, several of them got into making masks and PPE equipment to share with frontline workers, hospital staff, and then elderly homes, wherever there was shortage, people were making all these masks. And then since no one was able to come to the temple, each one was doing it at their own home, and there would be one person run around, collect it, and share it with people where it was needed. So that was something community did last year. But this year, because the need in India is significant and the challenges are greater there, we decided to kind of do a fundraiser in order to send money there. Now, with regard to changes that we have made, they're significant, as every other congregation has mentioned. In Hindu way of life, once a temple is dedicated, Nitya Puja has to be done. Nitya means daily. Daily prayers has to be offered at the temple. No questions asked. And therefore, even though the temple was shut down, the priest would take turns. One would go in the morning, one in the evening, to offer daily prayers to the divine. So that's something we did. The other thing which we did was to offer a lot of these programmatic rituals and celebrations via Zoom. And only the priest would conduct the rituals, and it is the board members and the management that was responsible for Zooming. So we didn't even use volunteers. It was just the working board and the management that showcased most of these programs to the general public. That's something we did. The third one is in Hindu way of life. There are 64 sanskars, or duties, an individual has to carry out in his life. Right from being born, even before being born, before conception, at the time of conception, prior to conception, and then being born, naming ceremony, ear piercing ceremony, tonsure, so removing hair of the child after a year, and then giving solid food. Everyone is ritualistically celebrated. And all of that had to be completely prohibited because the priest couldn't go or visit to somebody's home to do it, or the devotees were not allowed to come into the temple to perform. So what does it mean? It meant a couple of things. Number one, people are missing out on a lot of things. They postpone a lot of these things, weddings. And the only thing we allowed priests to go and conduct was funeral. At the time of death, they could, again, preferably through Zoom. And in some cases, if the families insisted they have to be there, then we had to maintain social distance. For 15 minutes, the priest would go and conduct the final rites. So that's something we did as well. And all of that changed the financial end of the temple as well. So which means I know other faith tradition would have experienced similar kind of a dent. Most of the Hindu temples across the nation saw a decline of their revenue by 50%. Fortunately, in Louisville community, our community was very generous. We did not see any decline. In fact, we saw increase last year. And part of the reason for that was the Zoom transition to programming and people being kind and generous and gracious in offering during the tough times. So that's something that benefited us. This is something typically we don't do, and it is prohibited to do, which is taking pictures of divine in the temple and then showcasing in public is a no-no in Hindu tradition. But yet, the times are different. All major temples in India were doing it. Therefore, just to be in communion with and in connection with the community, where people who missing the presence in temple or the prayers or congregation or worship or ritual or celebration, guess what? We brought them in via Zoom. It is against the principle. And in fact, there were even some complaints within the community, people who are highly conservative saying, oh, we are violating this. No problem. The whole world has changed. We have to change with the world if it is to be meaningful as well. So we did that. So which means as a result, technology came to an aid so to connect the community, as others have mentioned. So that is something that we talked about earlier. So that's something we did. Now, in celebrating last week, the in-person celebration, we discontinued that model of beaming into people's home via Zoom. And the reason for that is we wanted people to come and visit the spiritual space, to get energized, to collectively reinforce each other, the values and the purpose, and also spiritual power or energy. And satsang, the body of people coming to dialogue, discuss, and improve each other, their strengths and goals towards worshiping Almighty. All of that collective action is what we wanted to promote, and hence we opened it up in that sense. So as a result, the values, some of them were modified. Principles, we kind of, as much as we could follow the scriptural injunction, we did. But yet science is something we want to accept, because life is too precious. Life is divine, and the divinity and sacredness has to be protected so that it could be used for a greater purpose of not only helping others. This is something yesterday I watched. Somebody sent me a video of a brand new hospital being opened in India, where massive prayers were conducted, where all the, according to Hindu tradition, because it was opened by a Hindu doctor. But when the doctor was interviewed in terms of why he did this prayer, even though he is scientifically using his knowledge and experience treating people, he said it's very simple. He said he worked with Mother Teresa, and Mother Teresa told him one word which left a lasting impression in his mind, which is, a hand that serves is greater than a mouth that prays. So in other words, his idea of service emanated from it. And in respect, he said that even though I'm an experienced physician, I do most complicated surgeries, but yet at the end of the day, when I think there's a greater probability of success, those cases fail. And when I think that certain cases are bound to fail with absolutely low probability of success, they tend to survive. Am I the reason? He said, no. There is a power beyond me that is responsible for it. And that's the reason I worship the divine. That's a power. That's a Dhanvantri. That's a lot of medicine. That's a Ayurveda. That's a Hindu way of life. And as a result, we concluded yesterday with a small prayer. It says as follows. It says, Om Tat Purushaya Vidmahe Amirta Kalasaya Haste Tanno Dhanvantri Prachodayat. I worship to the Supreme Person who holds a pot containing nectar. As I meditate on him, let him kindle my intellect with wisdom. In the same manner, another one is Om Adi Vaidyaya Vidmahe Arogya Anugrahaya Dhimahi Tanno Dhanvantri Prachodayat. I worship the first doctor who bestows health, that is the divine. As I meditate on him, let Lord Dhanvantri kindle my intellect with wisdom. And with that, I pray the same Lord kindle the intellect and wisdom of each and every one of the divine souls in our community and globally, in order for people to protect themselves. And if science is a way to do it, let us use science, because it's divine creation. If vaccination is proven scientifically to be effective, let us follow the scientists who have dedicated 50 to 60 years tirelessly working on bringing those infectious disease to control through modern medicine. So let's consider that as sacred and do it. And with that,
Thank you.
leave the floor to others.
Thank you, Johnny. I so appreciate you embody so well that integration of deep devotion along with intellect and wisdom. And thank you for your presence and the way you reflect on that. Deeply appreciative. Lori Kyle, who is with the First Unitarian Church here in Louisville. Lori, share some about the resources in the Unitarian tradition, which is in many ways was birthed out of this kind of acceptance of science and Enlightenment thinking, and very kind of a rational while also deeply engaged in the values of humanity. So thank you for representing that tradition. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to IPP to be here. That's exactly right, Judd. Well said. In Unitarian Universalism, there are 7 principles. The 7th one speaks to the interdependent web of all of existence. So part of a UU person's motivation to be vaccinated would be that spirit of interdependence. So not only are we looking out for our own health and welfare, but we're also concerned about others. And also in the Unitarian faith tradition, we have 6 sources, and those sources speak to how we find our inspiration, what authorities religiously and theologically do we draw from in our own faith. It's a mosaic kind of faith, as Judd has mentioned. Those sources are one's own direct and personal experience of transcendence with the divine. Also, words and deeds of prophetic men and women, such as the Buddha, the Prophet Muhammad, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, these kinds of people. The wisdom from the world's traditions, which we are hearing wonderfully today on this panel, also specifically the Judeo-Christian faith traditions and the spiritual teachings of earth-based traditions, native indigenous traditions. So those are 5. The one most relevant to today's conversation for us in the Unitarian Universalist tradition would be human, I'm reading this verbatim, humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science. And we have relied on that heavily during this time of pandemic. So it's actually been kind of ironic that UUs are typically known to be and see ourselves to be very, very liberal. And yet with the vaccination and the following of science, the CDC, what the governor have said, we have been very, very conservative in our approach to caution. We haven't had any services at all since March 15th. Our first one in person will be this coming Sunday. We're very, very excited about that. But anyway, science has definitely led us to be very conservative in our approach to being vaccinated. I would say that how we are changed as a faith tradition post-pandemic would be, I won't repeat a lot of what I've already heard, which applies to us as well. And I will also say just the idea of sharing. Definitely the genie is out of the bottle, so well said. And I think that that's exciting. I think that these electronic opportunities to connect, while a lot of us we're so zoomed out, we're so tired of Zoom, it is a little bit tiresome because there is definitely no replacing an in-person experience of connection. However, it's a fabulous tool that our technological age has brought to us. And the fact that we could be sitting here together, sharing these thoughts and experiences right this very moment is a blessing. And will never be the same because of our opportunities to connect in these ways. The net is so much wider than it used to be. And it's not that Zoom didn't exist. In fact, in our congregation, we Zoomed every service. We have been for years, but there have been, 1 or 2 straggled people who might be on vacation who would tune in. Now, as someone mentioned earlier, probably there won't be quite as many people on a typical Sunday in our seats in the sanctuary because it's more comfortable being at home, and we've kind of normalized that. So pros and cons to that, I think a little bit, but definitely one of the pros is that we're just able to reach so many more people and that it's just more accessible. It feels more accessible now. And the other thing that I would say is it's just so much easier to share. So we can have a minister anywhere in the world who can be sharing their words and wisdoms with us here in our sanctuary, given technology and screens and cameras and such. So I actually think that it's exciting that our horizons have been broadened. because of the pandemic. Now we can go back to what we know, and we can also be enhanced by ways of being together that we knew about but didn't really utilize, but now know more about the benefits of utilization. So that's what I would say. And again, thanks so much, Judd, for having the opportunity to share today.
Well, of course, Lori, and so appreciate the way you embody and share and reflect on that tradition, and blessings to everyone as you all do the really hard work of figuring out what does it mean to be a religious, spiritual community in the midst of these changes. I want to end with Dr. Cyrus. Dr. Cyrus is a member of the Baha'i community of Louisville and an incredible spokesperson and also a physician. And so I love this integration of people that are deeply engaged in spiritual traditions and also expressing that through their care of people in the medical world. So Dr. Cyrus, if you'd unmute yourself and also share a little bit about the Baha'i community. You are one of the fastest growing world religions, but one that a lot of people don't know about. So thanks for representing that.
Thank you. And thank you for organizing this wonderful get together. And the past hour and a half almost, I've learned a lot about and gained a lot of wisdom. I like to start my presentation with a Baha'i prayer, which almost sums up a lot of things that we heard today. Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Baha'i community is a group of people who have embraced the teachings of Baha'u'llah, the latest manifestation of God, who has brought the teachings that are relevant for today's life. And at the pinnacle of it, of course, is the unity and oneness of entire human race. Baha'i community in Louisville is a little bit about 77, 76 years old. And we are a group of people who, like everybody else, have for the past year and plus been meeting on the Zoom. But like everyone else, this distance really has not weakened, but rather intensified our love and adoration and attraction for each other. Before I go any further, let me be very clear, both from a standpoint of medical person, like Dr. Babar started it, I'm going to finish it. Scientific medicine is based on evidence. Evidence-based medicine has proven that vaccines work. Unequivocally, I'm going to state that. From a standpoint of the Baha'i community and Baha'i teachings, the Baha'i person must be obedient to the government of the land and see knowledge and science as a gift from God. And the vaccine is a gift from God to spare people from the ravages of this deadly virus. So therefore, from a Baha'i standpoint, absolute, unequivocal yes to the vaccination. We still have not decided to completely get together, and our concern is our younger folks who are younger than 12 years of age and the risk of us passing it to them. So we're going to still wait a little bit longer. But I'd like to also talk about the lessons that we learned from a standpoint of an individual as well as a Baha'i. This pandemic proved one more time that we are really living in a global village. This is not separated countries and continents. And you could tell from the speed of the spread of this virus how closely knit we are. Well, it's not just a bad thing that it should show us that we are one humanity. I think there are a lot of positive aspects to this oneness of humanity that once we realize and practice that, I think we can eliminate a lot of things that we see this pandemic as a test from God, a test to show that we really need to be more mindful, not only of our oneness and unity, but also not go back to what we used to be calling it normal and in our comfort zone. We discovered both globally and even nationally that there are a group of marginalized folks who really couldn't fend for themselves. And because of limited means, disproportionately suffered the consequences of this virus. And to mention a few, people of color, Latinos, the Native Americans, all those communities suffered more. So after everything is said and done, we cannot go back and leave those folks alone and by themselves. We need to help them upraise their standards, help them to be able to become a more active and contributing members of the community. And the other one is the issues of food insecurities that is still a lot of folks are grappling with. These are the folks that prior to this pandemic, they had a completely normal home, normal life, normal food and everything. But as a result of this pandemic, there are social issues that need to be addressed by us all collectively, and therefore give it a deeper and a wider meaning to the oneness and unity of humankind. I will not dwell anymore because I think articulate and wonderful speakers before me said what needs to be said.
Dr. Cyrus, thanks so much. I especially appreciate ending with the emphasis in that message about our interconnectivity. One of the repercussions has been, it seems like we've become very nationalistic over the last year. And I know there was a lot going on with the election, but we've been very focused around our borders. And I want to just reiterate both what you said and what Johnny said is this is a global issue. And I think now as we're beginning to emerge from that, there are other parts of the world that are just emerging in their suffering from COVID. And I think we need to open up our dialogue and our moral concern beyond just our national boundaries at this point. And we as religious leaders have a responsibility to make sure that our government and our communities are being global citizens. So Dr. Cyrus, thanks so much. You always represent both in your life and in your teaching the embodiment of that we are all one and that we are all interconnected. I want to do a deep bow. I do realize, and we've had some chat going on in our chat. I don't want in any way to assume that this is that everybody's in agreement about one, what our religious traditions say, nor what science says. There's been a comment that science is not monolithic either, and there are a variety of different views in science around this. And so there was no intention in presenting this as a one-way conversation, just a way of all of us trying to be faithful where we are and wrestling with our own responses to COVID. So thank you all that have joined and included those chats in the comment. So I'll end. I wish we had some time for some more dialogue. Maybe we'll have to do another one of these so we can actually have dialogue. But to all of you that are serving religious congregations, know that we surround you with wisdom and blessing as you reemerge. And we're going to look back on this time as such a transformation across our world and institutions, and I think specifically religion and religious congregations, and what will emerge from this is going to be fascinating to watch. So thank you all for being in the leading edge of the creativity and faithfulness that our religious traditions hold for our community. So thank you all that have joined us, and you're welcome to share this video. We'll put it up on the Interfaith Paths to Peace website and share it over Facebook. So you're welcome to unmute and say some blessings and thanks to each other. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judd. Good to see everybody.
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate you all. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Peace. Thank you all.
Thank you.